What an honor and a privilege to be here today. And it is kind of weird, I think, for all of us to be here. So I'm a social entrepreneur, an open government activist. I'm, as you said, the executive director of Open North, which is Canada's leading open or nonprofit organization dedicated to open data in Canada. We also work in the civic technology sector. After my humanities degree, I continued my studies in philosophy. I just needed more, I guess. And I went to Trinity College Dublin to pursue that for a year. And then began a career in democratic development, which has taken me to about 12 or 15 different countries around the world. At first, I worked in Croatia and Serbia for a few years. And here we're looking at 2002, 2003. With an international organization that supported political institutions and processes. So mainly working with political parties and through election monitoring and helping organizations like that. So this was in the aftermath of the Balkan Wars of the 1990s. I witnessed the physical and psychological impact of NATO's bombardment of Belgrade, the dark shadow of ultra-nationalism, the razed houses of ethnically cleansed neighborhoods, the desperate isolation of remaining pockets of minority populations. In my early 20s, it seemed like I had come too late. Somehow, something big had happened, and I was there to witness kind of the aftermath. And I felt like I had missed something. I had missed that moment, and I lacked the context to engage in the here and now with the people that I was meant to support in their endeavors. So I had a strong urge to be in the world. I felt compelled to live an active and contemplative life. In a world shaken by 9/11, a climate of flux, war, and disorder pervaded. This was also an opportunity to dive deeper, to explore beyond the pale, pursue situations that would challenge me to my core. My humanities education, in my view, was the most practical degree that I could have ever studied, ever taken. So I'll focus on three different experiences in 2005 and 2006. So the French historian of civilizations, Fernand Braudel, once said, all history must be mobilized if one would understand the present. In 2005, I traveled to Kabul and worked for the United Nations Election Complaints Commission, the ECC, an international body that was there to adjudicate complaints around the first election in Afghanistan's history. There was a lot of complaints, as you can imagine. The day before I arrived, the ECC had released a list of about 25 to 26 different candidates that were going to be excluded from participating in the elections. Candidates also known as warlords at that time. They hadn't disarmed their militias, therefore they couldn't stand in the election, in the democratic process. So large crowds surrounded the ECC compound on my first day on the job. I'll never forget this. And they were chanting something that I didn't understand because it was in local language. They were saying, death to the ECC, death to the ECC, death to the ECC. Where was I? Was this the fault line of civilization? Was I a mere peon in another chapter of the great game? Was the razor wire lining the UN compound walls my only protection from barbarity? Fear, suspicion, ignorance seemed to fill the minds of expats that surrounded me. My mission was not to civilize. The Afghans that I met taught me a great deal about their history, the coming and going of peoples and cultures, eras of tremendous flourishing like the Bactria period that preceded Islam in Central Asia. My humanities degree taught me who I was. From this footing, I was better prepared to broaden my horizon, to face the other and see ourselves by listening actively and thoughtfully. Not everybody welcomed democracy in Afghanistan, obviously. At least not with that label. But many people wanted a life of decency, basic human rights, and freedom of speech. It was a lesson in humility, but it was also a lesson in the context where I was and the pitfalls of Western imperialism. So now let's turn the page and allow me to set a context for you. So a leader with autocratic tendencies ascends to power democratically. Pluralism gradually dissipates under his rule. Independent media outlets are shut down, the most vocal journalists against the regime are killed. Political institutions and parties are barred from competing, and the state is taking over the private sector. new legislation is passed to clamp down on behavior and attitudes deemed extremist. Ethnic minorities are targeted and deported literally in cattle plains. Political leaders capitulate under the pressure of the state. Youth camps dedicated to the cult of the leader are on the rise. The West turns a blind eye during the so-called backsliding of democracy, while this country falls deeper into fascism. This wasn't the Weimar Republic. This was Putin's Russia as I experienced it in 2006. And my world changed when I woke up a few streets away from Pushkin Square in downtown Moscow on May 1st of 2006. I remember being dropped off at my apartment and told not to leave until someone would come and pick me up. I didn't know how long they were going to be away and when they would pick me up, but I was just told, don't leave the apartment. So waking up jet-lagged and disoriented, I heard what sounded like a big parade. It was May Day, right? May 1st, down the boulevard below. I opened the blinds and saw a procession holding up large portraits of Stalin. Where was I? In the following months, I had the privilege of working with Russia's pro-democracy activists, including Garry Kasparov, who some of you may remember from the big computer that he played against as the world chess champion. So Garry Kasparov, the former world chess champion, who was also a major player in the Other Russia movement. Those months were filled with anxious episodes, marked by a gradual increase in fear and threat, from casual intimidation, harassment, wiretapped conversations, beatings, poisonings, and killings. My life seemed alarmingly worthy of a John le Carré novel. In this context, recalling the Polish author Czesław Miłow's 1953 novel, The Captive Mind, my humanities education taught me that the work of human thought should withstand the test of brutal, naked reality. If it cannot, it is worthless. This extreme situation made me appreciate that there is such a thing as a good fight. I stayed in Russia as long as I could. Fortunately, I had the benefit of a Canadian passport that enabled me to leave. But I met probably some of the most courageous people ever in my life in Russia. So let's close on a sunnier note. So you'll recall this. So after witnessing horrifying episodes of religious intolerance and political oppression, Voltaire has Candide decide that the best thing to do in the world is to settle down, live peacefully with his neighbors, and produce something of value to others, which he can sell in the local market. I think he moved to the outskirts of the city of Constantinople at the time to tend his own garden. When I came back from Russia and Afghanistan, I met Jack Layton in the early days, in the very, very early days of the NDP in Quebec. With no real network or infrastructure in the province, I ended up with unusually big responsibilities. They needed people to do things, to build a movement, leading campaign teams, training candidates, etc. But for Voltaire, to cultivate your garden can also mean to mind your own business. That's not what I had in mind. As uneasy as I felt about personality-driven politics because of my previous experiences, the people that I was with the NDP, we believed that we were shaping our country's history by building a progressive movement or an alternative to the dominant parties at the time. We know how that story ended, but that's fine. It was still a worthwhile endeavor. I believed that it was necessary to think and act the humanities. So my attention gradually turned to the potential of technology as well. So I got tired of politics, a bit disenchanted. And as I turned my attention to technology and shaping our society and the role of data, especially, in building more transparent, accountable, and responsive institutions, I started to focus on how this can enable us as free agents to define and resolve the most complex problems of our day through data, through access to information. Literally as a conduit, the energy, a new resource that is untapped that we need to maximize. So collaborating with developers, coders, hackers, the critical thinking that I gained from my humanities education provided sober thinking and conversations about technology's promise. Building and facilitating data collaboration around these big problems that united us. So should systems be at the service of humanity, or humanity be at the service of systems? So I'll leave you on that thought for a deal. Thank you.